It's not just that they've lost 8 straight games and 9 out of their last 10 and fallen out of a playoff spot. They have had a fucking cupcake of a schedule to lock up that playoff spot. Their 8 straight losses started off with Panthers and Rangers. Sure, those are good teams, better teams than the Flyers. But then they lost to the Canadiens, they lost to the Blackhawks, they lost to the Islanders, they lost to the Sabres, they lost to the Blue Jackets, and they lost to the Canadiens again. And not only have they lost to these teams, they've gotten fucking smoked by these teams with an emphatic final, probably nail in the coffin last night, 9-3, 9-2? 9-3 against the Montreal Canadiens. So they have been outscored 18-42 in their last 8 games, 5.5 of which have come against bad teams.
And like some of these losses, as you mentioned, they're all against bad teams, but like the Blue Jackets destroyed them.
Yeah.
Was that the game in which the Blue Jackets got 6 goals from defensemen? I want to say it was.
Yeah.
The Blue Jackets destroyed them. We love the Blue Jackets, famously. I like the roster and everything. If you're trying to hold on to a playoff spot, you got to smoke the Blue Jackets. And they get smoked by them. They get smoked by the Canadians. Sean, if you get Torts ready, in those final minutes of that game, I was spitting on my hands, maybe even peeing on them a little, Jorge Posada style, just getting ready for the ultimate 1-second Torts presser. I thought he was going to stand around and say, I dare one of you motherfuckers to ask me a question. This was Torts, and we're going to play a couple minutes of it, but this was Torts' post-game press conference.
The score ends up being the way it is effort or lack of effort part of it?
No, I'm not questioning their effort. I just think we've lost ourselves in managing games, and I think some guys may feel it a little bit because they want to try to get us out of this. But I don't question the care. I don't question the effort. Because as I said, it's been a strong group all year long. I'm frustrated for them because we are this is rock bottom tonight for us, and hate to see us at this time of year be playing this way after all the good minutes we've put in throughout the year.
As you said, the effort is there. The effort is there, everything, but is the tank just empty?
You know, I think there's been a lot of talk of that. This time of year, all teams are tired. All teams are tired. We're not as gifted as some teams. We have a process that we're going through. We can't forget that. We're still building here. I appreciate all the work they've put in to put us in this spot to play these type of games, but we just have not been able to elevate our game. It's my responsibility to put them in that spot and try to get them to elevate the game. Have not done it, these are hard lessons. One thing great about this league, and we're on the wrong side of it, it's unmerciful. When they get you, it's unmerciful, and I love that about the league. We just happen to be on the wrong end of it right now.
Thanks for the time.
To me, that's a guy taking a victory lap after he declared his team dead like a week and a half ago.
Hashtag Torts knew.
Torts knew. So that's maybe why he wasn't as angry as you expected him to be. He was right.
So instead of saying, I dare one of you motherfuckers to ask me a question, he's saying, I'm assuming one of you motherfuckers is going to pay me a compliment. Right. So he's staying on his best behavior the whole. After each answer, he's like, oh, the next person that's going to say, hey, Torts, Mazel Tov. How do you feel about the way? And well, thank you very much. It's a very big week for me and my family.
It almost felt like some people were trying to get him to, like, they asked about the effort. They asked about certain things that Torts would have gone off on in the past, but Torts was locked in.
We should bring in Charlie O'Connor from PHLY, covers the Flyers, talks about them, can probably give us some perspective on all the things that are happening with the Flyers right now. Charlie, thank you for joining us. First thing we want to do is just react to that Torts presser, because if ever there were a time that he would not be in the fucking mood, you'd think that would be when he was yelling. What is going on in Torts' mind right now?
That's kind of been what's happened this year, though, is that the games where you think he's going to explode, he actually is pretty gracious. And then the games where you feel like, yeah, the team played pretty well, those are the nights when he explodes. If you remember the night last week when he called the team soft, he said they didn't have any balls. that was an overtime loss where they tied the game with less than 10 seconds remaining.
Yes.
You know,
So
and
weird.
I'm not saying that game was perfect. The second period was awful, but it wasn't necessarily the kind of game you would expect a coach to completely lose his shit on the team after the game. They came back, they pushed, they lost it overtime, they got a point out of it. It happens. Torts lost it. Well, this game, you would think, would be a game where he would completely lose it. You know, they lose 9-3 to a bottom feeder. It essentially knocks them out of the playoff race for all practical purposes. And it sure looked like, if you wanted to make the case that the team gave up, this would be a darn good game to make that case. I honestly, if I had to guess, I mean, number one, I think he just knows this team is dead tired. I think he knows that they got nothing left. But I also think that he believes he may have pushed them a little too far. Obviously, you had the Sean Couturier scratch. You had him shitting on the team in the media. You know, it was less than a month ago when he got kicked out of a game and suspended for 2 games. It's been a wild month of Torts antics. And I think there might be an element here where he is acknowledging that he maybe pushed this team a little bit too far, and now he's kind of trying to cut them a break in the media rather than just bury them.
Well, I mean, you got into some of the reasons there, but like if you're diagnosing one of the most embarrassing NHL collapses that we've seen in a while, like, is it just them being tired? Is it them running out of gas? Is it them finally being exposed towards the finish line as a not very good team? Like, what is your diagnosis as to what's gone wrong for the Flyers?
I mean, I guess the answer to all those is yes, because I think it's a little bit of everything. But, you know, going back to the team argument, yeah, I do think that this particular version of the Flyers, as in how they stand right now, is not a good team. That said, it's worth noting that this isn't the team that was very good in the first half. You think about it, in the first half, they had Carter Hart. In the first half, they had the really good version of Sean Couturier. They had Sean Walker, who they traded at the trade deadline. That was, objectively speaking, a better hockey team. Was it an elite team? No. No, they were probably still overachieving, but it was a better team than this version of the Flyers, especially accounting for the fact that Samuel Ersson, really since the All-Star break, basically since he took over for Carter Hart, has been running to the ground. I think he's exhausted. I think that their top pair of Cam York and Travis Sanheim, because it spent the entire month of February playing 30 minutes a night, I think they're dead tired. I think there are multiple players playing through injury. I believe Travis Sanheim is, in addition to being tired. I think Travis Konechny probably came back from the injury he suffered in practice about a month and a half ago a little bit too soon. He doesn't look completely healthy to me. So this particular version of the Flyers, no, I don't think it's a good hockey team. But the reason why it's not is because I think a bunch of key guys are gassed.
Yeah, I mean, even if all those things are true, they're still this version of the Flyers is probably a better hockey team than a lot of the teams that they have lost to in this stretch. So combine that with the fact that like expectations change over the course of an 82-game season. Do you think that what's happened to the Flyers and at the end of the day that this season is going to be looked at as a disappointment or a failure in Philadelphia?
Well, I think it'll definitely be looked at as a disappointment by fans. Whether they want to say that it's a failure, I guess that just depends on what your expectations were for the year and how much they changed. Philadelphia fans are justifiably tough on their teams. They're tough on their players. They're tough on their coaches, and they have every right to be. So they have every right to be really pissed off at how this went, especially when the organization all year was selling the idea, and the players were too, selling the idea that we have this super strong culture, that we've made changes, that, you know, we're different. We don't do the types of things that the teams of the past 3 years do, where we get blown out by the Rangers 9-0, and then we play them, you know, a week later and we lose by 6 goals. Like, those were the things that this team was supposed to be finished with. And over the last 2 games, they lose 6-2 to the Columbus Blue Jackets, the worst team in the East, and then they lose 9-3 to the Montreal Canadiens, like the other worst team in the East. And yeah, I don't think the Flyers, this version of the Flyers, the one that exists right now, is as good of a team as the teams they're fighting against in the wild card race. However,
go ahead.
Their schedule was easy enough where they could have just kind of coasted, and instead they collapsed.
How well do you think Tortorella does have his finger on the pulse of this thing, because the Couturier thing, I know that he was horrible for a long stretch, but that shocked me. Like, has he necessarily pulled as many correct levers as we think? Because over the course of this season, Torts became their star player, and the fans were kind of in Torts we trust. I definitely buy the idea that they're just burnt out, but is more of this on Torts than maybe we're allowing?
I think absolutely some of it's on Torts. And I think that over the final month of the year, it wasn't even just was he pulling the right levers, he was pulling every lever he could see. I mean, he was trying every trick in the book to motivate this team. And look, I didn't agree with the Sean Couturier scratch. However, it's worth noting that the first few games after the scratch, he did get a positive result. His team played harder. They won some games. They pulled themselves out of what looked like it might be becoming a death spiral. Then, of course, after that wore off, the team completely fell apart. And you could certainly make the case that when they dealt with adversity a second time, if they no longer particularly care for the coach, that didn't exactly help. But I do think Torts plays a role in this, absolutely. If you're going to give him credit for the first 65, 70 games, you have to give him blame for the final 12 or so. However, I also do believe that they're not in this place if Torts isn't dragging as much out of the team as possible over the first 2/3 of the year. So it's one of those tough conundrums where, yeah, Torts deserves blame, but if John Tortorella isn't the coach of this team, I don't think they're in the playoff race to have this collapse in the first place.
So who are Philly fans mad at? They're generally mad. Like, who are they? Is this like a fucking Torts? Man, like the magic wore off? Is it this team sucks? Are they mad about the trade deadline? Like, who's the bad guy?
Well, what I would say, and this is more based on my read of social media, because I've been obviously covering the team. I haven't been able to go out and like chat with people in the real world very much. It really just depends on who they didn't like to begin with. You know, the people who have long, yeah, like the people who have long been skeptical of John Tortorella are blaming this all on John Tortorella. The people who didn't like the way the Flyers approached the trade deadline because they think that a team that's in a playoff race shouldn't be selling are blaming this on Briere. The people who have long thought that this team should be blown up and there's a rot at the center and it's all the players' fault are blaming it on the players for quitting on a coach for the third time in 6 years. So I don't think there is a unified object of ire. I think it just comes down to whoever fans went into this disliking the most, they are blaming it on.
So let me ask you, like, what is the long-term outlook of this team after this fucking weird season? Is it generally positive? Where do the Flyers stand in the Metro and in the Eastern Conference moving forward?
I still think it's more positive than I thought it was going into the season. I think they have had players who have taken legitimate steps forward. Tyson Forrester, for one. I know his numbers at the end of the year are going to look real bad, but I think Sam Harrison showed a lot up through the beginning of March when I think they just started running him into the ground. Joel Farabee had a really good first 2/3 of the year. Owen Tippett has established himself as a quality scorer. Like, they have guys who have taken steps. Morgan Frost took a big step this year, I feel like, in terms of establishing himself as a clear-cut middle six center. So I think good things happen. The thing that continues to be what will face this team until they solve the problem is they just don't have enough high-end players. They don't. And I think they know that. Like, they have Matvei Michkov coming. He might not be here for another 2-3 seasons, but he's coming, and he might be one. You know, if he pans out the way they think he's going to, he's one guy. But we've watched in Edmonton, Edmonton couldn't even win with two guys. Like, you need a lot of really good players to be a legitimate cup contender. And the Flyers need a lot more really good players. Now, how are they going to get them? Obviously, they've stockpiled some draft picks. They have 2 first-round picks this year. They have 2 first-round picks next year. However, those picks very well might not be at the top of the draft. So they're going to need to draft really well in, non-top 5, non-top 10 positions. They're also going to need to make some shrewd trades. Like, they're going to need to take advantage of the fact that some of their NHL players are developing well, and then maybe look to turn them into better players by using the assets they've stockpiled. Now, can they do it? Yeah, they could do it. Will they do it? I don't know. Depends on whether the front office can execute the way they should. But that's the problem that's facing the Flyers. They don't have enough good players. They don't have enough high-end players. And until they get enough high-end players, these sorts of things are going to happen because they just don't have the talent to stay with the best teams in the East, the best teams in the Metro.
I feel like there's been minimal consideration towards Kevin Hayes' fingerprints on this situation. Where do you think those factor in?
The fingerprints are all over this. Kevin Hayes' fingerprints never left the building. No, obviously that's ridiculous, but it's funny. It's certainly funny.
It's
Charlie,
definitely
we're a
funny.
big Kevin Hayes' fingerprints podcast. We talk about his fingerprints a lot. Thought that they were heavily snubbed for Masterton. They, give me those prints, baby.
We all silly like the mayor.